This is the story about how something that didn't work still ended up healing me. I tried ayahuasca hoping something would finally change about my memory. But even while high on ayahuasca, my memories were still slipping away from me. This was my first experience with any psychedelics. When I first arrived at the retreat, I was struck by the beauty of the location. It was a pyramid-shaped building in the mountains, with sweeping views and beautiful decorations. Our guide described what would happen. He talked about ayahuasca, how the ceremony would unfold, and what the night might bring. The ceremony takes place in the dark, and it is meant to be an internal journey. Right before the ceremony, we went outside and watched the sunset behind the mountains. And after the sun had set, we went back inside, and this was the moment that the ceremony actually began. First, we all went to our designated spots, and then, one by one, we went up to the guide to get a dose of the medicine. When it was my turn, our guide told me that the medicine tastes awful, and it was best to drink it quickly. I drank it and then washed it down with some water before returning to my designated spot for the rest of the night. It took about 20 minutes before I began to experience anything. When my eyes were opened, I was experiencing a completely different thing than when my eyes were closed. When my eyes were open, I would experience a more visually interesting world, even though it was muted by the darkness of the room. When my eyes were closed, I would have a deeper internal experience. What I remember isn't in strict chronological order. Time became fluid and moments blended together, but these are the moments that hit the hardest. The first sign that I was experiencing something was subtle. The room was very dark, and I could only see silhouettes. In the distance, I started to perceive shapes in the darkness that didn't directly correspond to where the darkest parts were. The outlines were slightly darker in a way that felt deliberate. The darkest corners pulsed with a black and white type of static. My blanket, I noticed it changed. Certain parts of it looked three-dimensional. This was the first intense visual that I had. When I looked around the room, I saw glowing energy in many places. At one point, I looked at the woman beside me, and I could see her body glowing with a white energy, as if I could see her skeleton. I found myself wanting to assign significance to everyday objects. For example, the doorway on the other side I knew just led to the bathroom, but it felt like it was a doorway to a magical, special place. The skylights on the sloped window of the building gave me a strong sense that I was inside a space station, and right on the other side of the window was outer space. And at one point, it looked like the man beside me was covered in fur, and he resembled the Grinch. There were a few times when different parts of my body would hurt, and I didn't know if this was a physical issue or if it was in my mind, helped along by the medicine. The main thing that inspired me to try ayahuasca was the trauma of discovering that I had an incredibly terrible memory. I believe that the ability to visualize is connected to the ability to remember. And because I could not visualize, that probably meant that my memory was naturally worse. I also believe that not being able to visualize and remember much affected my emotions, and that I may have been much less emotional than an average person because of this. So these thoughts were naturally front and center in my mind. When I close my eyes, I basically see static, but not the type of static that an old TV would show when it's not tuned to any channel. Not black and white static. Mine is dark yellow and dark green kind of mixed together in little blobs. However, now that I had consumed the medicine, closing my eyes revealed something different. I would see faint shapes, swirls. It was not much, but I was seeing something. I would describe these things as objectively not very interesting, but to me, they were very beautiful. A shape would appear to me. I would admire it, and after a few seconds, it would disappear. And then a new shape would come up. And after a few of these things, I realized I couldn't even remember the shapes that I had seen just a few seconds ago. And I was thinking, here I am, high on ayahuasca, and I can't even remember something that I had just seen. My life is still being ripped away from me. And a wave of sadness washed over me, and I burst into tears. But after a while, something shifted. I started to see things differently. I didn't focus on the fact that I was forgetting things that I had just seen. I realized that even though I couldn't remember something beautiful, there was always another beautiful thing right there to replace it. It was this constant stream of beauty. It didn't matter if I couldn't remember something. There was always more beauty to replace it. And this didn't just apply to the visuals. This was life in general. Life is a constant stream of beauty, and I'm experiencing beauty whether I remember my life or not. This was an incredibly powerful reframing and made me able to move on to the next thought. I was wondering about my terrible memories, and would I ever be able to find them? Would ayahuasca be able to help me retrieve them? Would it be able to give me some insight into what happened with them? I was drifting through space, going from one location to another. I can't visualize. There was no landmarks, but it was as if I was going from one set of coordinates to another. And every time I came to a stop, I would search the void looking for my memories. And when I had decided that they were not here, I would then move through space to another location, and I would search again. And after doing this a few times, I had the thought, what would it even mean to find my memories? Like, would it be a book of memories? And if I read this book, would I get my memories back? And I kept on going from place to place looking for my memories. And eventually I realized they were not to be found anywhere. They were simply gone. There was no point in continuing to search for them. They would never be found. And this was me finally accepting something that I had been struggling to accept for all this time. I had always previously held out hope that somehow I would be able to recover these memories. But now that I had acceptance of this, I also had acceptance of my Aphantasia Too. It was a permanent thing. But I'm okay. I'm different, but I'm not broken. This acceptance was a lot easier now that I had the reframing of life being a constant stream of beauty. There was no need for me to cry anymore. So after I accepted the fact that my memories were gone, I began to turn my mind onto my mind itself. I prided myself on being a very analytical and logical person. But then I asked myself a question I had never asked myself before. Who says I'm a logical person? And the answer was clear. I said I'm a logical person. But if I said I'm a logical person, can't I decide I'm something else? I could be a crazy person. I could be a highly emotional person. Why couldn't I change the label I assigned to myself at any time for any reason? I felt liberated from this constraint of this self-assigned label. In retrospect, it feels so obvious, but I think it would have only been an intellectual realization if I wasn't under the influence of the plant medicines. When I first started feeling the effects of the medicine, I felt tethered to my body. I believed that I was experiencing something significantly less than everybody else because I was not able to visualize. I kept comparing my experience to what I thought other people were having. I wanted to float free, and I felt like I was tethered to my body. I was still thinking to myself, and I wanted my brain to go completely silent. At one point during the ceremony, our guide said, "At this time, you should all have your eyes closed." And my mind latched on to this word should. I went into what I later learned was called a loop. I kept on thinking and focusing on the word should, and I had all these thoughts focused on should going through my mind. Why should my experience be like anybody else's? Why should I want to cut this tether? Why should I want to silence this analytical part of my mind? Why should I want to see visions? And why should I care whether or not I should? My thoughts are normally sharp and agile, but they now moved with this agonizing slowness. I would be thinking a thought, and I would have to say it to myself in my mind for me to understand it. But the words were coming very slowly. And often, before I was able to finish my thought, a new thought would come that was also related to should, completely interrupting the first one. I had so many thoughts about should that I cannot remember. But now I'm left with the strong desire to never tell anybody what they should do. Who is anybody to tell anybody else what they should do? I cried many times during the experience. The medicine brought up a lot of powerful emotions. One time when I was learning to accept my aphantasia and SDAM, tears flowed very easily. I was wearing this thick cotton shirt with long sleeves, and I was getting very hot. I took it off, and it seemed like it was a waste for bringing it. And then I realized that this would be the perfect thing to wipe away the tears. It had a purpose. The purpose was not what I had originally intended for it, but it had a purpose nonetheless. And I realized that everything had a purpose, even if it seemed unimportant or unexpected. At one point later on in the night, our guide asked if anybody wanted more medicine. I thought that if I had a stronger dose of the medicine, I would be able to break this tether and drift free from my body. So I got up to get some more. But the second I stood up, I was hit by this wave of visceral sensation, more intense than anything I had experienced that night when my eyes were open. I had this very strong feeling that it was a long time ago, back in caveman time, and our guide was a shaman sitting by a campfire. In actuality, it was only a very dim light that he had. And the floor of the building was made of big rocks. But in my mind, it felt like this pathway walking to the shaman. So I started approaching, and I was very wobbly. And when I got there, he looked at me, and with a knowing smile on his face, he said, "You don't need any more medicine." And then everybody burst out into laughter. Everybody was laughing at me. Or were they? After all this time, I was steeped in my own internal journey. Wouldn't everybody else be occupied with their own internal journey too? So I made my way back to my spot and relaxed for the rest of the night. My mind was relatively clear compared to earlier in the evening. I felt like I was on the verge of a cosmic journey, and the universe was about to open up to me. I was largely past this should loop, though the occasional thought would still come into my mind. Why should I go on this cosmic journey? I spent the time listening to the Icaros, which was the stunningly beautiful music that the facilitators were making. And it amazed me how they were able to make such beautiful music while also being under the influence of the ayahuasca. I think I finished my journey earlier than most that night. I didn't purge at all that night. I heard people purging after I had stopped experiencing any altered states from the medicine. A couple times, my stomach felt a little bit uneasy, but nothing more. I slept soundly with my mind still processing what had happened. And when I woke up the next morning, I wasn't cured, but things had shifted, and I had found some acceptance in a way I had not been able to in the past. This was just the first night. I'll share the rest when I'm ready. Thank you for being here with me.